Hello Revolution students, and welcome back to my series of videos on the Chinese Revolution. This video is going to look at the First United Front, and the First United Front was an alliance that was formed on the 26th of January 1923 between the Kuomintang, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, and the Comintern. And I remind you, the Comintern was that government agency set up by the Bolsheviks to spread revolution and support revolution outside of Russia internationally. It was, I suppose, a marriage of convenience between the GMD, the CCP, and the Comintern. Sun Yat-sen, the leader of the Kuomintang, had been looking for foreign support because he believed the Kuomintang needed this support in order for them to overthrow the warlords, reconquer China, reunify China, and establish a modern republic again. It had a number of positives for the Kuomintang, the First United Front. It strengthened them politically and militarily. The Comintern sent out Mikhail Borodin to help advise the GMD and to help establish their military and support it. So one of his key acts was help set up the Huangpu Military Academy, which was like an officer training school for Kuomintang officers. He also helped reorganize the Kuomintang under Leninist principles, and in particular the GMD adopted democratic centralism within its organisation. And that, I'll remind you, democratic centralism was this idea or this principle that the party leaders, they debated various motions, but when they had made a decision, then the rank and file within the party, within the organisation, followed those decisions. It also strengthened the CCP politically. So when the CCP joined the First United Front, they were a very small party, and you can see there in January 1923 they only had about 420 members. But joining the First United Front legitimised them as a revolutionary political party in the eyes of the Chinese, and it led to a phenomenal growth in their numbers. So by the start of 1927, we can see there were 57,000 members. So that's January, February 1927, prior to the Shanghai Massacre and the White Terror. When the Shanghai Massacre occurs and then the White Terror spreads throughout China, approximate numbers, there were only about 10,000 members left after the slaughter that occurred at the hands of the GMD. Mao was heavily involved in the First United Front, and in some ways he was more attracted to what the GMD's ideas about revolution were than he was with his own parties. So the GMD, unlike the CCP at this time, was actually quite interested in fomenting and agitating amongst peasants and getting the peasants to set up revolution. So even by 1926, the GMD in the south were actually sending out agitators into the countryside up to places like Hunan, and encouraging the peasants to rise up and overthrow exploitative landlords and so forth. Mao Zedong played a key role in this, so he became involved in the First United Front from about 1925 onwards, and he was the acting head of the Kuomintang propaganda department, you can see there, in early 1926. And then he became head of the Institute to Train Peasant Organisers, agitators, from May to October 1926. For CCP members at this time, when they became a First United Front, when they joined the First United Front, they also took up GMD membership. So Mao Zedong, for example, he was a CCP member, but he also had GMD membership too. And he played a crucial role in developing the revolution amongst the peasants at this time. And as I alluded to just before, so Mao was more attracted to the leaders of the GMD. At this stage, the CCP totally ignored the revolutionary role of the peasants, whereas the GMD did not. So the CCP was the CCP leadership at this time, who were located in Shanghai mostly. They were focused on agitating amongst the workers, fomenting revolution amongst the workers, where Mao Zedong was more concerned about, or more focused on the peasants. And then in the mid-1920s, the GMD had established a variety of departments concerned with rural problems. So Mao's role in the GMD and in working amongst the peasants, it makes that developed and evolved. By early 1927, he'd actually gone to Hunan province, and he'd gone and surveyed peasants and what was happening in the countryside, because the countryside was in turmoil. Peasants were rising up, overthrowing the landlords, and he did a survey of these peasants in Hunan province, and this was the basis for his Hunan report, which is a very, very significant document written by him. In it, he sets out pretty much his basic revolutionary theory. We're going to look at this in a later video, but key ideas such as his belief in the peasants playing a primary role in revolution in China, his belief that class struggle wasn't between workers and capitalists in China as such. It was more the class struggle between the peasants and the landlords, the exploitative landlords, which was the key class struggle in China. And also he talks about the relationship between the peasants and the party too, and that the party itself, the CCP, should actually be subordinate to the will of the peasants. But we'll look at all of that in the future. Sun Yat-sen, he spoke to a friend in 1923, and he referred to this relationship and the reason why he sought support from the Russians rather than, for example, the British and the Americans, or the reason why he got support from the Russians. He'd actually tried to gain support from the British and the Americans, the US, but they'd rebuffed him. And there's a nice little quote here, and I'm going to read it to you now, which sums it up, his attitude towards this alliance he's had to make with the Russians. I suppose an alliance of convenience. The Republic is my child. It is in danger of drowning. I am trying to keep it afloat, and we are being swept down the river. I call for help to England and America. They stand on the bank and jeer at me. So jeering's when you're laughing and calling names. There comes a Russian straw. Drowning, I clutch at it. England and America on the bank shout at me. On no account to clutch the Russian straw. But they do not help me. No, they jeer themselves and at the same time tell me not to clutch that Russian straw. I know it is a straw, but it is better than nothing. So he had really no other options. He needed foreign help, and the Russians were the only ones who were prepared to give that to him. Okay, so that's pretty much the summary of the key points associated with the First United Front. We'll just have a look now at a couple of historical interpretations. So the first one is by Morris Meisner, and he writes that the shared nationalist and anti-imperialist sentiments constituted the bond that brought the GMD and the CCP together in the Russian manufactured alliance. And Jonathan Femby writes, in this second historical interpretation, for the USSR, the prospect of establishing a base of influence in the world's most heavily populated nation was irresistible. So they saw China as perhaps the most fertile ground for the spread of communism outside of Russia. Sun rejected class struggle, and Borodin found Canton a veritable Babel. So all these different people with different aims, speaking a different language almost, I suppose, what Femby's referring to there, calling the doctor, and that's Sun Yat-sen, an enlightened little satrap, so a bit like a dictator of the movement. But each side needed the other, and that's the key point there. So the Russians, the Comintern, needed the Kuomintang, and the CCP definitely needed the Kuomintang and the Comintern, because the Comintern were funding the CCP. So all these needs brought these three disparate groups, the Comintern, the GMD, and the CCP together to form the First United Front in order to overthrow the warlords and establish Kuomintang rule throughout China. So anyway, I hope this video has been helpful for you in understanding the First United Front, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.